My name's Keith Barnes. I own KCB Architecture. We're a small architecture firm here in Milwaukee, and it's a small office. There's 5 of us. I live on the east side of Milwaukee. It's a real gift to live in that area and walk around and see the diversity of architecture that exists. Everything is really well designed, well thought through. There's a lot of craftsmanship in this turn of the century era, and it's fun to walk around and study that.
Keith Barnes, thanks for having us.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Tell us where we are and a little bit about your practice.
Sure. So our office is here, 400 East Wisconsin Avenue. We're right next door to the Pfister Hotel. We moved into this office space 2 years ago. We're expanding. We're adding actually 2 more desks next week, which is great. And yeah, it's great being downtown, right in the heart of everything in Milwaukee.
So I want to take it back to the beginning. When did you first start being interested in architecture?
I first started being interested in architecture when I was a kid, and I grew up 60 miles west of Chicago, and my dad would take my brothers and I into Chicago to go see Bulls games and White Sox games, and I was always inspired by the urban infrastructure going into the city, and I just knew I wanted to be a part of the built environment, and I ended up at a very young age being interested in architecture. And I can remember like the junior high assessments where they like put you on a career trajectory based on this assessment that you take, and architecture wasn't one of them. And I remember taking it to my advisor. I'm like, something must be wrong here. It tells me I'm not supposed to go into architecture. And luckily she was like, oh, don't worry about it. But yeah, I've always been interested in architecture since I was a kid. And the great thing about it is everywhere you travel, everywhere you go, walking around your own neighborhood that you live in, you get to study what's been done before you, study great architecture everywhere you go. And so I love it. I love talking about it. My wife and my kids have become interested. All of my close friends have become interested in architecture. And yeah, I was grateful to have a practice here to work on architecture that's inspiring. So
was it like the work of Sullivan or Frank Lloyd Wright, or was it, mostly commercial or residential that inspired you? Or do you think that, there are so many greats that came out of Chicago.
Oh yeah. I was definitely inspired by Frank Lloyd Wright, visiting the Roby House and a lot of his works in the Chicago area. I also remember seeing the Farnsworth House in Plano, Illinois. It's a beautiful like modernist piece. Yeah. I've never been like so tied to like one specific typology, like modern architecture, traditional architecture. I've always just been interested in the process of creating architecture and the craftsmanship and thoughtfulness that goes into both the design and the execution and the collaboration that's needed. And later in my career, I had the opportunity when I worked for a firm in New York to work in collaboration with Renzo Piano, a well-known Italian architect. And ever since working with him and with his office on a high-rise project in New York City, I've been really inspired by their process, the process for how they start with nothing and come to a really great work of architecture with some really talented people. So I would say Renzo Piano is probably one of my favorite architects.
So does their process start from the inside, laying out the floor plan and then moving to the fenestration, or there's an idea of the fenestration that inspires the interior?
It almost always starts from the inside and works towards the outside, and then it just kind of becomes this back and forth. It's an iterative process where you're working the inside and you're working the outside, and if you just do one or the other, it never really comes together as a whole complete design that checks all the boxes of what the client wants and creates something that is visually interesting for, longevity for the community that's built within and that kind of thing. So yeah, it's always a back and forth, and I think it's always better. I've learned to start with the inside and then, start working your way out and then come back in and back and forth.
Do clients usually come to you with a pretty refined program, or are you coming up with that through your process or sort of a questionnaire?
It varies. Some clients really know exactly what they want, and they have a good idea of how it's going to come together. and we can see it the day we visit the house or the site, that it's going to come together exactly as they envision. And other times clients just have an idea how they want a space to feel, or they have an idea of, like, if it's a house, for example, I'd like to have these many bedrooms, these many bathrooms, I'd like for it to be 2 stories or something like that. And so it can be very open also, and we kind of help them during the early stages define what the program is, what the square footage is, and through some simple concept massing, see how it can fit on the site, what's within the zoning and code required setbacks. And that's a fun part of the process, but yeah, it varies. It varies for each client. Is
the majority of your work remodeling and additions to existing structures or new construction, or where is the split?
It's about a 50-50 split. We're doing, I'd say about, half of our projects are large additions and remodels, and the other half of our projects are new construction, new house on an empty lot, or we're tearing down a house and building a new house on that empty lot. And then we've got some multifamily and some new development multifamily projects that are on a completely empty lot and kind of more out in the suburbs. So
sure.
It varies.
And so KCB is mostly residential at this point?
Right now we're about 60% residential and 40% commercial.
Oh, so still a fair amount of commercial.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
We've only dealt with you on the residential. So
right.
If you were building a house for yourself, what style would it be?
Yeah, my answer to that has changed over the years. It always used to be like something that's very simple and that uses natural materials and is sustainable, and ideally it's a closed system, so it's
fully passive.
Fully passive and net zero type of house with concrete and wood and glass as the three base materials.
Yeah.
And then concrete using all like fly ash as a recycled component, and using all like engineered wood that's recycled wood fibers and that kind of thing. So, but now that I have kids, I've got young kids, like my idea of that has changed a little bit, and I tend to lean more towards classical and traditional architecture. Now I would lean more towards buying a beautiful old house and kind of renovating it while keeping the historic integrity intact.
You're cheating a little, Keith. But
yeah.
Dodge the question. So renovating at this point. And I think that's cool. I guess from a builder's perspective, we see more people caring about the amount of square footage and less about building details. As someone who is a student of building science, getting that wonderful separation and rain screen in there and great details around the pans and building a house that's 100-year home minimum seems to be my priority, but that's exterior insulation is always the first thing that's cut from the budget. Why do you think that is? And do you think that that's unique in this market, or is it an education thing for the client, or is it just not something people value here? Or
that's a good question. I think a lot of it is the educational component with the client and really understanding the economics of, doing a fully passive house, super insulated walls and roofs, and, having to incorporate mechanical ventilation and more air exchanges. A lot of it can be a little daunting and not so well understood by the clients about what the value is long term for this initial investment. So we definitely have some clients that have expressed interest in this, and we're creating projects that check a lot of these boxes. For the most part, when we start talking to clients about this, they kind of just want to keep the initial investment in check, and they're not interested in doing anything that their neighbors haven't done.
Sure.
So that's what I'm finding.
That's why we end up in so many houses as builders that have doors on 45s that builders designed, and all sorts of other horrible things that you and I have to fix when we come back to these projects, and just not valuing it.
Totally. On the remodel side, the biggest mistake that's made is doing an addition or a remodel in a very kind of microscopic view, and not looking at the house or the floor plan holistically, and how you might consider renovating again in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. And, it's just a shame. And we've been in these situations where we're like ripping out a kitchen or completely redoing something that was just remodeled 5 years ago. One of the most important things for any homeowner that's thinking about a remodel or an addition or anything like that is to, work with an architect, designer, builder in a collaborative manner and thinking holistically. We do a lot of that as architects. We see that as our job, is to kind of ask the questions, and we won't just draw a portion of the house. We draw the whole house because it has to be whatever we're doing has to be understood in the context of how it fits within the whole. And the whole house works together as a system, both from a flow and programmatic standpoint, but also from a design standpoint. So that's an important part of our process. And we've heard from clients that have come to us after working with other architects that they appreciate that part of what we do, and really like taking the time that's needed in the early stages and asking the questions. And sometimes the scope expands and sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes if the scope does expand, it becomes this thinking about, okay, maybe there's another phase here and another phase there, where now they have a roadmap for what this remodel might look like within today's budget. And then 5 years, 10 years, 15 years down the road, they know what the next steps will be.
Yeah, I think our company has a similar ethos in that we don't want anyone to know that we remodeled the house. That's like our competition, and the market has spent so much time educating people and marketing towards design build as a process. And as builders, and as someone who cares about architecture, I think that that's probably the worst thing that you could do. There's no builder that I know of that is a great designer. And if you were a great designer, you would not be working for a builder, or it would be very, very rare that you would be, and you would be there for a very condensed period of time.
Right.
So the goal is obviously to make, in a remodel situation, to make it look like it was never an addition that put on. And then, or unless it was the intention. In Europe, we haven't had any of them, but in Europe on the grade listed properties, they always do a very modern addition on the end, which
Yes.
I wish people would do here, but it hasn't caught on.
Yeah.
But we see people who go down the design build route, and we come in later to remodel it once someone else has purchased it. And there's just not the thought that an architect would have put into the project. And we find that having the architect, interior designer, and builder all engaged at the same time at the beginning of the project makes the smoothest project. And people seem hesitant sometimes to sign up for that. But I guess my argument is, how is that any different than design build? But you're getting all professionals, and you can walk away from any one of them if you don't feel that it's a great fit.
Totally.
So we're always proponents of it, but I think it's about educating the market, at least in my opinion. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Oh, absolutely. We have those same conversations with clients at the beginning, and we always advise our clients it's best if we can have the builder at the table with us during the planning stages, both from a budgeting standpoint and also from a technical standpoint. It's great to have that live input that you guys provide to our clients when they're asking, okay, what if we decided if we wanted to go another 5 feet out, if we wanted to go with a deeper basement versus a crawl space? And there's a lot of questions that come up throughout the design process, where having the right team members there to answer the questions, the builder, the architect, and then the interior designer on the finishes and fixture selections, and it's invaluable. It makes the whole process so streamlined.
I think it's just a matter of us more time in the market, because in other markets that I talk to around the country, everyone goes to an architect first. In Milwaukee, it seems that everyone goes to these design build firms, which the minute I walk in a home, I know who did the work and whether it was good or not. So we always say that we want to work on that room once and not see you again for that room again. We'd love to see you again soon, but not for a different room or for a different part of the house. So, and if we build you a new home, that it be heirloom quality and 100-year home minimum. So, and I think we can do that now. You can go to close to a passive home standard without getting the certification. Or I'm not a big believer that the certification really means anything, but we can get a great blower door test out of something using materials that really aren't that much more expensive, with just some value engineering, maybe going to 24 on center on a 2x6 wall rather than 2x4. That's not a huge change. And clients just don't even, conventional builders wouldn't think to even do that. Right. And if it calcs out and an architect's involved, I mean, that can improve your blower door test, that and some exterior insulation markedly.
Exterior continuous insulation, for sure. That's a big one. And a lot of builders are resistant to that because it's done all the time in commercial construction. It's not that common in residential. So having a partner, a construction partner that's engaged and understands the process and is more open to doing something different from what they've been doing for the last 3 decades.
Yeah.
That's an important part of the equation here.
In new construction, you see it all the time. Everyone's building the same house with the same really steep, horrible roof and putting as many different jogs in the facade as they possibly can, with as many different roof lines as they possibly can. And in Wisconsin, that seems to be the home that people have built in the suburbs for the last 30 years. You're right. And there's been no variation, and everyone's home looks the same. And they all have the same leak that we come to fix.
Right.
So, all right. So back to your education, you are a licensed architect and you studied in the University of Wisconsin?
Correct. Yep. I'm a licensed architect in Wisconsin and New York, and I went to school at the University of Wisconsin Milwaukee School of Architecture. I have a bachelor's degree, and then, right after doing my undergrad, I went right into work, and then worked at Kaler Slater here in Milwaukee for 5.5 years. Did my internships there, and did most of my hours that are required to get licensed there. And then got licensed shortly after working at Kaler Slater, and then moved to New York and got licensed in New York also.
And how long have you been practicing in Wisconsin?
I started the practice 4 years ago, 2020.
That's great to be so busy in 4 years. That really must mean the market's responding really well.
No, it's been awesome. And I started out in basically in an office at home, and then I got a small, I had somebody refer to it as a closet at a co-working space that was about 7 feet by 9 feet. I started there and then expanded to a larger office at that co-working facility, and then we moved into this office just a couple of years ago. So the growth has been wonderful, and a lot of that is because of the residential work, the remodels and additions. We've gotten tons of great referrals from clients, and clients referring us to their friends and that kind of thing. So a lot of it's been word of mouth. There hasn't been much marketing, advertising on our end that's been needed. The work has just keeps coming in, which is awesome.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, that's how we built our practice. It wasn't 4 years, it was 20, but I think we're finally at the point where the phone rings consistently, and we feel blessed for that. But having a nice office like this really lights a fire under your butt to, and you feel responsibility. My first real office gave me so much joy, but also such a feeling of, I can't even describe it, that I was responsible for others making a living and for paying my rent, and really lights a fire under you to do the best you can and grow your business. So to anyone starting out, I always say, get your first office as soon as you possibly can, because it will explode your business because you have no other choice. Yeah, no, I totally agree. And when we bring our clients in here, and you've been a part of a lot of these discussions, and Dave has from your office, we like to make it a whole experience. They come in here and they sit at this table, and our other architects, we all sit in the meeting, and it's not just one of us that's working on that project. We all sit in on the meeting, and we all offer input, and we like for them to have a really special experience when they come in here. And we give them espresso or coffee and maybe pastries, and we put the plans up on the big screen. We find it makes for a much more comfortable, enjoyable, and collaborative environment. And so having the office is key for sure to that. I think that between, the small one-man shops and then the big shops, you're striking sort of the balance where people feel important, but they feel like there's a team behind them, but also don't feel like a number. Yeah. So I think that's great. Take me through your process, and when a customer calls, what should they expect? Yeah, so if a customer calls us, a potential client calls us, either Carol or myself will ask the questions about what they have in mind, talk them through what the process entails, which is we'll always set up a site visit, which we don't charge for. We'll come to your house, and we're going to look at whatever it is you want to do, or your project site. And it's really important because a lot of homeowners, clients don't really fully understand what it is that we do. So
They can't understand what the process is going to look like. So we find by being at the house or being at the site and looking at things with them, talking through the ideas and the options of what the possibilities are, it's really important for both of us, but for us to learn more about the client, for the client to learn a little bit more about us and get a level of comfort with us. And then we'll just talk through the scope and what the process is going to look like. After that initial meeting, we'll have a good idea of what the scope of work is, what the efforts are going to be. We'll write up a proposal. The proposal looks good. We'll then schedule a time to go out and take measurements. And the measurements are very important, even if we have a lot of clients tell us, oh, we have plans. We already have existing plans or existing blueprints. But a lot of times things change, and dimensions are very important in construction, as you know. Field verifying things is a really important part of the process. And then, unfortunately, it takes a little bit of time, but we model everything three-dimensionally, the floor plans and the exterior.
So let's back up to, so you have the complimentary site visit, and then they're issued a proposal based on the scope, and does it have different phases, or how is that?
Yeah, it'll be broken out by phase. So there will be a phase for a zoning and site analysis, and then there will be a phase for doing a concept design phase, which is basically us drawing the existing house or the existing structure, and then we're putting together some ideas, floor plan, and kind of massing concepts for what the addition could be or what the remodel could be. Or if it's a new house, we're putting together a massing for how big the new house is going to be from a square footage standpoint, and very, very preliminary plans. When we send the initial ideas, don't expect it to be 100% right,
Sure.
because the design process is an iterative process, and we need the client feedback. That's the most important part. So this is where we'll set up a Zoom call, or they'll come to our office preferably, and we'll sit around this table and we'll have the plans up here, and we'll start iterating, and we're listening, we're asking questions, and we're talking through the things that they're seeing. They're responding to the plans for the first time. That process where we're going to iterate the design, we're listening, we're responding, we're adjusting and manipulating the design. We'll probably have 3 of those meetings throughout the course of a concept design phase.
Back to when someone contacts you, let's say that there are 2 stakeholders, a husband and a wife. What should they have discussed prior to engaging any of us? What do you think is important, and what do you normally see as the problem?
The most important thing is just to have an idea, a rough idea of what it is you want to get out of the project from a program standpoint, and what type of budget you're comfortable with. And now the second part, the budget, as you know, a lot of homeowners don't really understand what construction costs are, or sometimes they don't really understand what various vehicles are to get financing to execute a project, and to be comfortable with that vehicle for executing the project financially, economically. So it varies a lot. I mean, we've had projects that started out with a budget X and ended up getting approved with a budget 2X and 2.5X, just because they didn't understand what the value of the property can be after the construction is done, and understanding construction loans and refinancing, that whole process. So I'd say the most important thing is just to have an idea of what it is that you want to get out of the project, and then kind of a rough idea of where you'd like to start from a budget standpoint, so we can start reconciling that.
Tell me about your ideal project.
My ideal project is, I've always been very interested in adaptive reuse of historic structures. I've had the opportunity to work on converting a historic structure here in downtown Milwaukee at one of the firms I was with in the past into a hotel, from an office building into a hotel. And right now here in our own practice, we're working on a project in Brooklyn, New York, converting a restaurant into music recording studios. The idea of taking something that exists, taking something with some historic fabric and character, keeping all of that, preserving it, converting it into something that's completely new and of today, and making the building relevant again and bringing the building to life. I love those projects.
Yeah.
And to me, they're extremely gratifying, because we get to dig through old blueprints that were drawn in the late 1800s, in the example of the Central Library project that we're working on right now, and understand the architects that designed the structure originally understand what their intent was, because things had been modified so many times over the course of decades, and try to capture that in a new design that has a completely different program in some cases.
We call it peeling the onion.
Yeah.
It's fun.
Exactly. So I love those projects, and we're starting to get more and more of them, and I'd love for us to keep getting more of those.
My first project ever was one of those. It was a bar that should have been knocked down. We lifted the entire thing up, put a new foundation under it. At the time, it was the largest residential green roof in Milwaukee, so it was really an interesting project to be a part of.
That's
That was
awesome.
20 years ago now. So we were talking about, well, really an individual, but a couple needs to be on the same page with budget, most commonly, program, and level of finish. And that's what we find in our practice, and I'm sure the same in your practice.
Yeah, I mean, those are the most important things to kind of reconcile design scope to budget, is getting the couple or the stakeholders, the decision makers on the same page about what it is that they want and what kind of budget they're comfortable with. And then, of course, the level of finish and the square footage in the program are going to feed into what can be done within that budget. So it's very important to...
So people are always reticent to give someone their budget. I've found that they're reticent to give the architect their budget, they're reticent to give the designer their budget, they're reticent to give the builder their budget. I can speak for our firm that our goal is not to use up your whole budget if we can.
Yeah.
Like, how do people get comfortable with that? And how do you fix and rewrite that narrative?
It's a great question. I like to think about it, put myself in the client's shoes and think, like, why wouldn't they want to share the budget? And I can understand the process is very foreign. It's very foreign to them. And a client would be concerned that if we say our budget is $750,000, but we think, but we don't really know, but maybe it can be done for $500,000.
But we're comfortable to $1 million.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a lot, unfortunately, in the industry, there's a lot of contractors that will do what you just said you don't do, which is if they say it's a $750,000 project, now all of a sudden this $500,000 project is a $750,000 project. So unfortunately, we all have to live with the reputation that exists within the industry because of a lot of bad contractors that are out there.
And a lot of that's design build. That's the number one thing I tell people, is that when you separate out the three different design professionals at the beginning, architecture, sometimes engineering, and interior design, and then have the builder collaborating, you can walk away from any one of them. And then, you're protected in a way. At the beginning, we as builders act as the owner's rep and a conduit to you.
Yep.
To protect, not from you, but, to work with them so that you get the best product from you. And then they work with you to make sure that the builder is treating them fairly as well.
Exactly. Having that independent layer of consultation from high levels of expertise, both on different spectrums, but we both know each other's side of the business well enough that, we're both able to offer different opinions, and having that kind of like check and balance within the design process is extremely valuable. And the other thing that you just mentioned, which I think makes a lot of clients very comfortable, to your earlier question about the budget discussions. If they're not comfortable answering the question because they don't have the information, then what better way to go about finding the answer to that than like tiptoeing, taking steps towards it, which is, let's start with some initial ideas, like initial concept designs. And now we're looking at real plans. We've got real dimensions. We can start looking at square footages and lineal footages of walls and numbers of windows and what the roof pitch is going to look like. And now we can really start breaking it down together into something that's more concrete and can actually be tied to something visual. And maybe we find that this design, it's over budget, or maybe it works within the budget. And then it just becomes, when we've got you, the builder, at the table with us, it becomes an iterative process together with the client and with the builder to kind of reconcile the design to the client's budget that they're comfortable with. And that's why it's just smooth sailing from there, when you've got the right people at the table procuring the design together. And then also having the builder engaged early in the design, understanding the importance of certain aspects of the design when it comes to construction, and being able to communicate to your subcontractors carpenters, electricians, plumbers, HVAC guys, about coordination that has to happen to preserve certain elements of the design. It's invaluable. So, but you're right, tiptoeing into it and not having full commitment early on and being able to part ways with an architect or with the general contractor rather than locking in for some big lump sum thing that you don't even know what the process is going to look like. I think it's
scary.
It's very scary.
And you don't own the plans in many cases, which would really scare me. We always tell people that you want to own the plan. You can walk away from any of us at any point and lose a small amount of money rather than losing a large sum and not even owning the plan, which
totally.
We've had people bring us a plan from design build. We can't use that plan. It's not there. Which stinks. So what questions would you advise a client to ask when retaining a builder?
So a lot of clients are very economic focused, and they want to understand how much a project is going to cost. They go about selecting a contractor based on who's going to give them the best price. And we have a lot of these conversations with our clients. You shouldn't just be looking for a contractor that's going to give you the best price. You should be asking the types of questions about what does the process look like for you as the contractor? What types of construction durations are we going to be looking at? How do you procure your bids with your subcontractors and communicate that to us as the client to make sure that, we know what it is that we're buying. We're not just signing on a dotted line with some big number. We know where all the money is going and how all the money is going to be allocated. Therein, again, it's like we were talking earlier about levels of finishes and custom cabinets and Italian-made cabinets versus, stock cabinets. And there's big variances that occur within each line item of a budget. And the most important thing is to have a partner, a construction partner at the table that's going to open up the dialogue, show the numbers, have the real conversations about, okay, if we make this change, you can save this amount of money. Having a contractor that you're comfortable with, they have a reputation for executing great quality work, but they're also going to work with you and help you get to where you want to be, both from a design execution standpoint and also from a budget standpoint.
I always tell the story of my parents' renovation 40 years ago. They went with the cheapest bid and they ended up with hollow core doors and they ended up with all sorts of other shoddy stuff. And our contract is often 40 pages long and it enumerates every one of those single things. And I always tell that story that at the budget stage that we may be more expensive, but we're building to a different specification. And when you have no plan, someone may tell you a lower number. It's important to figure out what you're going to finish at and if there are going to be any change orders involved because you didn't read the contract. Most people are only going to remodel or build a house one or two times in their lives, and they don't know the questions to ask. And doing your research online, asking friends, and it's so easy now to figure out whether a company is honest or not, if they're issuing a ton of change orders for things that should have been included. We all can't figure out what's behind the wall, but no one should be issued a change order for the quality of, basic fasteners and hardware. It's the difference between using a drywall screw and we use German GRK fasteners. It's a very competitive space and there's a very slim margin. So of builders of our caliber, we're all pretty much in the same ballpark, within 10% of each other at the final number. And usually if someone's significantly lower, they miss something. So we find it really disheartening when someone underbids on purpose to get a job at the beginning when they haven't even seen the plan. We always caution people to spend a little money for owner's representation at the beginning, to come up with a plan that's buildable. If you don't feel comfortable with the budget, walk away at that point. But guessing on numbers at the beginning, we will tell you a range, but based on what the finishes we expect from you, based on your Instagram or your Pinterest board and the program you've given us, but there's no way that you can compare contractors at that point until there's a plan. So reputation, what budget you're comfortable with, and making sure that there's great communication and that the contractor's on site every day and that they aren't jumping from project to project and they have the bandwidth to do it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's a big one, being engaged and, like you were saying earlier, cleaning up the job site every day, maintaining a clean job site. It's important for anybody that's having their house remodeled, but also for the workers to come into a clean job site. It's a safe job site. It feels like the kind of job site that has a higher level of rigor and discipline, which is the kind of environment that you want your forever home to be executed within.
100%. And our clients who are doing $50,000 projects and our clients who are doing $5 million projects get the same treatment, which is also, I think, somewhat unique to our company. And we're really proud of that.
Nice.
So what's your favorite restaurant, Keith?
My favorite restaurant
in Milwaukee
is La Merenda.
Okay.
I love the food is outstanding. Peter's an amazing chef. I love the idea of having a bunch of small plates because I have trouble deciding what I want when I see a menu. So I could just order a bunch of things and then share with.
They have a great back area too during the summer.
They do. Yeah, the outside patio is beautiful.
They need a little facade upgrade. Maybe you can sell them. It looks like a hole from the front.
We did a project at the building right next door, the old Sound Select. Converted that from a warehouse into music studios also. And now we're actually looking at doing an addition that might have like a coffee bar thing built out into the parking lot. So yeah, maybe there's an opportunity to collaborate with Peter to do something on his building too.
Keith, thanks for having us at your architecture firm. It was a pleasure
Thanks for coming,
meeting you,
John.
and we love doing work with you. So
we love working with you guys. It's been a real pleasure.
Great.